Are you tired of your instrument panel labels looking like this or this? Here's the problem. The gold standard for instrument panels would be laser etched aluminum. Now, these are amazing, but they're expensive. I mean, we're talking like $1,000 for a panel. Um, they're very hard to iterate. If you change a switch or a switch label, you're out another $1,000, I guess. Or you could put a sticky note over it. It's also permanent, which is a pro or a con. Um, Another option you have is to get with a local sign shop and design yourself some vinyl stick-on to add graphics to your panel. This is what I did 5 years ago, and it worked okay. Um, the problem is that vinyl stuff isn't designed to last longer than a few years. Mine started peeling up at the edge, and it started to look pretty rough. Also, when I went to change the design, it was easier just to print with a label maker. And so then I had this like mismatch of like duct tape, label maker, curling up vinyl graphics. Gross. Okay. Another option you have, obviously, is to use a label maker. These are nice. It's inexpensive. It's easy to iterate. The labels are surprisingly durable. I've had those labels in a hot cockpit for over 5 years, and they look just like I put them in. They look like trash, but they still look just like I put them in. So um, the downside with those is that uh, they don't look good, and passengers, I think, kind of get an idea for what their experience is about to be based on how well your aircraft looks. You know what I'm saying? Like aesthetics matter to the extent that you want your passengers to feel, safe and secure, and that they didn't just get into an experimental race plane that some guy just built in his garage. I mean, that's the truth, but if you polished it up a little bit, then maybe they wouldn't think that. So anyway, I don't like any of these solutions. And I have spent an entire month and meticulously experimented and tweaked this process that will allow all of us to design and manufacture professional looking labels for our experimental aircraft all by yourself. You don't need third party, you don't need expensive laser cutting, and it looks mwah, chef's kiss, amazing. All right, let's get started. Okay, so there are two things that you're going to need to make this happen. One is you will need a CAD software that is able to export something called a 3MF file. Okay, we're going to take this 3MF file, which is like an STL, but it includes separate objects that allow us to color layers. We're going to take those and put them in Bambu Studio, and then Bambu Studio is going to send it to your 3D printer, which leads me to the next thing you'll need. You'll need a 3D printer, but one with the ability to have multicolor printing. Okay. Um, Let me show you an example here. If I can figure out how to switch my overlay. Okay. Uh, so the Bamboo Lab A1, I think, is a really great option for this type of work. It doesn't have a huge build volume. 256 by 256 cubed is about 8 inches cubed. You would be surprised at how small your instrument panel labels need to be. I have a really long one that goes across the top of my aircraft, and it's only 12 inches long. So I think for most of the smaller labels you can fit them all into one print with this printer. In addition, you can also print it in multiple parts and just put them together. It looks pretty seamless from my experience. Now, the thing that you will need is this version here that has multicolor capability. So see this little device on the right here with the four spools of filament. they have motors on them that will extend and retract the color uh, when the printer calls for that color. So with this, you now have the capability to paint color into your print and print up to four different colors on one layer. This is really important for instrument panel labels because you want everything to be nice and seamless. You want it to look um, professional. So for as low as $500 for probably one of the best entry level printers, I would say. I think this is a pretty good deal. I am sure that there are other printers with multicolor capability that are cheaper than this. I would 100%. I know that's the case. But this is the one that I would recommend to you. Now, the printer that I just recently bought is this H2S. It's much more expensive. It has a much larger build volume, but it's technically the same. It has multiple filament colors. It can print multiple filament colors per layer, and that's really all you need. So when you're looking for printers, you need that feature. That said, that's all we need. We need CAD software and we need a multicolor 3D printer. So moving on, I've broken out the chapters here because I'm going to make a quick assumption that a lot of you have either never used CAD or you're inexperienced with it or you just want like a refresher. So the first couple chapters are going to be getting reoriented to CAD so we know what we're doing, so that when I cut you loose and you build your own labels, you don't just like immediately run into roadblocks. If you are already familiar or you just want to skip ahead and learn about multicolor 3D printing, feel free to do so, unless you aren't subscribed, in which case you do you, I guess. All right, let's get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is download the free version of Autodesk Fusion. It's got plenty of capabilities for us for what we're doing. No need to sign up for anything. You do have an option to use instead a product that is kind of an up and comer called Onshape. The downside to Onshape, from my experiments, is that Onshape has a very limited selection of fonts. So if you're particular about what font you use for your instrument panel, I would suggest that you just follow along with me and use Fusion. Fusion has the ability to use any system font that you want to. So you can install new fonts. You could find Boeing's like official font if you want to. We're not going to go that far. There's a system font that I like a lot. So once you have uh, downloaded and installed Fusion, yes, you do have to create a free account. I'm sorry, I don't control the world. If nobody asked me. Um, this is going to be your first window that pops up. So I'm going to do a quick run through. We're gonna look at the interface we have so we understand what we're looking at here. Okay. Much like a browser, I'm going to go ahead and close this. I don't want to save it. I was preparing for this. Okay. Much like a browser, you're going to have tabs up here on the top, and each tab is sort of like a new project. So if you click plus, you got a new project here. I'm going to close it. Um, The first thing that I would like to do is I would like to change one single preference in Fusion. And I would like for you to do this too if you are unfamiliar with Fusion. If you already know what you're doing and you know how to use the UI, then feel free, don't listen to me and just do the real engineering. But up in the upper right-hand corner where it has like the little silhouette of human head, I guess, click that and then click my preferences. Okay, and then in the very top here in general, we're going to come down here to pan, zoom, orbit shortcuts. Okay, it's going to be set to Fusion by default, but I like Tinkercad because it aligns with a lot of other 3D design software, including Onshape and uh, oh, what's the name of it? Bamboo Studio. The thing that we're going to use to input our 3D file into the printer, okay? So change this to Tinkercad, hit OK. All right, and then so what we're looking at here is we are currently in the 3D space. Okay, there's nothing to look at, so let's go ahead and create an object, and then I'll show you the rest of the UI. So everything in CAD is basically a two-step process. Step one is to create a sketch, like a 2D sketch. We're just going to draw a shape onto a 2D surface. Then we are going to what they call extrude the surface of that 2D shape into some 3D dimension. Okay? If that's confusing, don't worry. It'll make a lot of sense here in a second. So on the bar on top, right here where it says create sketch, we're going to click that. Okay? And so now what it's showing us is the three different dimensions that we have to work with here, okay? So green is vertical, red is like X, and like blue is like out of the page. So that's Z, right? Okay. We are currently looking at our work surface from the front right top side, okay? So this is the view cube. It sort of gives us an orientation in space at how we're looking at the X, Y, and Z um, origin point. Okay, so we're going to want to draw our first drawing. I like to draw it on like face forward. So I would select the Y and X plane. If this is confusing to you, you can hover your mouse over the view cube and see where it highlights the front. You can click that and it will select that pane, okay? Now notice we changed our tool set to the sketch tools. So these are all different, or you don't have to notice. You can do what you want. Um, so these are all the tools associated with drawing sketches, which are different tools that we would use in a 3D space, okay? And how I know that we're in the sketch is that it has this big green check mark that we click when we're done with the sketch, okay? And that takes us back out to 3D space. So what I'm going to do here is just draw a quick rectangle, okay? Um, so I'll click on the rectangle button. I will click once to start the rectangle, okay? And then I would click a second time to stop the rectangle, okay? Um, I think that's good for now. And then we'll go ahead and click Finish Sketch. All right. Now, when you do that, it brings you back out from the 2D sketch space to the 3D, not sketch space, 3D space, okay? And it reoriented your view to the home view, okay? And the home view is that same earlier that we had where it's sort of like halfway between front and right side and top side, okay? So you can click this little home thing and it always brings you back. Now, if you click front, it puts you front and center, okay? Because that's how we had aligned our original sketch. Okay, this is the square that we drew. So I'm going to go back to the home view, okay? Now, here's the second step for CAD. The second step is to extrude the surface that you just created from the sketch, okay? So here's the extrude button in the top left. I'm going to click that. It auto selects the surface because it just kind of figures out what we're working with. And then it asks us what the distance is that we want to extrude that surface to. Okay. So I'm just going to, instead of entering a distance, I'm just going to grab this arrow and I'm going to drag it out. See how we can make it thicker or we can make it thinner. Easy peasy. Okay. So we're just going to make it 10 millimeters for now. Can hit OK. And look at that. We have a 3D object that we created from a sketch and then extruded. Okay. Pretty easy. Now we can if we hold down the right mouse button, we go into an orbit mode and we can sort of orbit around the part. Okay. So we kind of have to catch the shadows here so we see where our angles are. But see how the view cube in the upper right hand corner is orbiting with us? So this is a good way to sort of like move your viewpoint if you wanted to see something very specific. Okay. Now I let go of the right mouse button. And then another thing I can do is I can use the scroll wheel to scroll in and scroll out. That zooms us in and out, okay? So right click to orbit, scroll wheel to scroll in and out, right? Okay. Now that we have something on the screen to talk about, let's review the rest of the interface here, okay? Um, an important drop down on the browser on the left-hand side is sketches, okay? The sketch one is the original sketch that we created uh, earlier, right? Now, you see how there's an eyeball here, but it's X'd out? Uh, when you consume a sketch for an extrude, the program will hide that sketch from you, okay? Um, you can you can do multiple extrudes from a single sketch, but you'll need to come in here and unhide it so that you can select it different surfaces in order to do more extrudes, okay? Another thing to look at is down here on the left. This is the history. So it shows that it started with a sketch, then we did an extrude, and then any other operations that we do will continue on to the right. You can grab this little marker and you can undo the past few operations, like if you needed to go back a step and change a thing, right? But it's even smarter than that. Check this out. If I go back to our original sketch and I double click it, okay, it brings us back to our original sketch. All right. So let me make a slight modification to this sketch. I want to add a fillet to one corner. Okay. So I'm going to click the fillet tool here, and then I'm going to define two surfaces on which it is going to fillet. Okay. And then now it wants to know the radius of the fillet arc. All right. So I'm going to give it a big arc here, just so it's really obvious, and then click Finish Sketch. Now you see what happened is it updated the sketch in history, and then it cascaded that change through the extrusion. And you'll find this to be true for many, many steps. So if you have a well-defined sketch on step one, this is just my experience, and then a handful of extrusions, which we'll end up doing because a lot of the text and edges and stuff get extruded in multiple steps, then you have the ability to simply go back to your original sketch, change the text, and then everything update all of this extrusions all the way down the line. It's pretty clever, okay? So this pretty much concludes the UI walkthrough. Now we need to get started on an actual instrument panel label, okay? So here's what I'm thinking we do for an instrument panel label. Let's do a three switch label. Uh, And we'll just come up with some fake dimensions because in your particular case, you're going to have very specific dimensions that you're going to be working off of. So if you don't already know dimensions of your instrument panel, I would suggest that you take something like a pair of calipers or a measuring tape, and you go out and you measure things like the critical dimension is the hole spacing. So like, for example, here's an example of my instrument panel label, okay? I happen to install my switches on 1 inch hole spacing, okay? Um, you will also need to know the size of the switch punch through, okay? So like how big does the switch hole does the switch need, right? Um, those two things are critical. Less critical is the amount of space that you have around your switches. So, how large that you make the outline is pretty much determined by what you think looks good aesthetically and the room that you have maybe running up against other switches or like ephuses or something, right? So go collect some of those dimensions if you don't have them. And then let's get started on creating your own instrument panel label. I'm going to click the plus, the new design over here on the right hand side. I will I will click create sketch. I like for my sketches to be on the XY plane. So I'm going to see let's see. Green is Y, and red is X. So I'm going to click the XY plane here. Now we're in the sketch mode. Now, one thing, there's two tools that you're going to need for this process that it would be beneficial to be up here. By default, they are not. So in order to make that happen, we're going to click Create. This drop down has more tools than there are icons up here on the top. So we're going to go to Rectangle, Center Rectangle, and then on this little three dot menu on the right, click that, and then click Pin to Toolbar to put it up here. Okay. Then you're going to come back in and do the same thing for the text tool because we use these tools a lot in this process. So, okay, once that's done, uh, let's go ahead and create a center rectangle here. So I clicked on the origin point here in the middle, and then I just drag one corner out here and then click. The dimensions for now don't really matter. We can adjust those a little bit later. Okay. Now, we happen to know that uh, our switches are on 1 inch centers, okay? So it's desirable to create some construction lines in order for us to place those switches as even as accurately as possible, okay? So what I'm going to do is create three construction lines that are 1 inches apart, and then I'll put the middle one sort of like right here on origin, okay? So let's come up here and go to line. And then in the right on the right hand side, under Sketch Palette options, see where it says line type. We're going to click the construction toggle. Okay, so whenever this is toggled on, you're creating a this dashed line here, which is used for dimensioning objects and just sort of aligning things, but does not count as an edge for the purposes of defining shapes to extrude. Okay, maybe that's overly complicated, but we use construction lines in order to align things, and just remember that. Okay, so I'm going to start up here. And if I hover over the vertical dimension, the Y dimension, the plus sort of snaps to it. So I'm going to click once to start the line there, okay? And then I'm just going to drag it straight down, snap to that green line, and then click again. All right. Now to get out of this, you can either click this plus check mark, or you can just hit escape on the keyboard, okay? So I've made one line. I'm going to just come some dimension out here, and then I'm going to make a second line, okay? And then hit L if you want a shortcut, and then create, I'm going to create a third line here, okay? I guess if you click plus, it keeps you in the tool, and if you hit escape, it takes you out of the tool. So I guess that's something we just learned together. All right, now what I want to do now is make sure that these vertical lines are on 1 inch centers, okay? So I want the center line to not move at all, so I'm going to click lock. I don't want it to go anywhere. Okay. So now if you grab it, you can't grab it and move it around. It's frozen in space. Okay. And then we want to call dimension. Okay. So everything here under constraints basically tells the program how far away something should be from something else, right? So the most simple one we're going to do is distance dimension. Okay. So I'm going to hit D, which I guess is over here. Okay. And then I'm going to click the middle line, and I will click the right line. Okay. And so now it's telling us it's currently 34 millimeters. Okay. Now, when I built my airplane, I don't know about you, I did not plan everything out in millimeters. Mine was in inches. Okay. But the smart thing with Fusion is that once you click, it asks you what the dimension is. And if you are in millimeters, you might actually be in inches in Fusion. I'm not sure what the default is, but if it happens to be one or the other, you can give it another dimension and it will auto convert that dimension for you. So I guess 1 inch is 25.4 millimeters. Okay. So I'm still in the dimension tool here. So I'm going to click the center and the left. And I think here's another trick that you can do. Instead of entering 1 inch again, you can click another dimension and hit enter, and it'll simply copy that dimension. So now if I change this to 2 inches, it'll change the other side to 2 inches as well. Okay. I think that's probably a good thing to do most times, especially in this case. If you ever like realize that you had the wrong dimensions for everything, you could put it change it in one place and it would change it everywhere. So yeah, I think that's what we'll go with. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is define a horizontal construction line for centering the holes. Okay, so if we have a bunch of vertical lines, we need to know up and down where the hole is going to go. Okay, so I'm just going to line all of my holes on the x-axis. I'm going to hit as a shortcut. I'm going to hit L, or you could click the upper left-hand tool here. I'm going to start on the from origin. If you sort of hover over something that can be used as a reference, and then you move in a direction, it will tend to snap to that thing. So like if I start in the origin point here and sort of come out to the left here, I know that it's going to give me a constraint that uh, holds it to the origin point, which is what I want in this case. So I'm going to click once. I'm going to go all the way out to the right, and I'm going to click again. Okay, and then I'll hit escape. So now we have a line here that uh, defines the horizontal dimension. Okay, so I'm going to click that, and I'm going to click lock because I don't want that to go anywhere. Okay, there's other ways of doing constraints. There's lots of ways of doing constraints. I just happen to do it this way. Okay. All right. So now we have the intersection of this line, and the horizontal line, all define points that we can draw holes on now. Okay. So let's go ahead and create a center diameter circle, third from the left up here on the top. And then I'm going to let it snap. Actually, let's go ahead and do the origin point. Okay. And I'll just click some. Oops. Okay. So here's where I messed up. Now I created a construction line for the circle, but I don't want it to be a construction line because this is going to define part of the 3D geometry, right? So I'm going to double click this line and then come over here to the right where it says construction and untoggle it. Okay. So now it's a real line. And see how when I hover over it, it sort of like changes what can be selected. All right. Now, if you looked earlier, you would see that the hole size was wrong. So let's go ahead and dimension the hole. So let's click Sketch Dimension, and then just click the outer edge of the circle, and then drag something out, and then click again, okay? So it thinks it's 31 millimeters. Now, I know that's not correct for my switches. I happen to have one of my switches here, okay? This is a BNC switch. And if you've got one too, then we will find out what exactly the dimension is here. This is how I find dimensions, okay? This is a cheap pair of calipers. You just use the calipers to find out what the thread width is. So I've got 11.8 millimeters or so. So here's another thing in 3D print design. You never want to make a dimension that fits a physical object the exact same dimension that you measure. Okay, you need to add a little bit of tolerance. So I'm going to guesstimate 12 millimeters is probably my huckleberry. Okay, if this doesn't work, the 3D printed part is like $2, and you just iterate, print another one, right? Pretty easy. And in fact, these instrument panel labels print pretty quick. It's only like an hour and a half, 2 hours at most, depending on how big it is. Okay. So we've got one circle. This is perfect, exactly what I want. I'm going to create two more. Hit circle. This is the one to the right on the 1 inch center. Oh, see how over on the right hand side I had construction line. So I'm going to untoggle this so the next two circles I don't have the same problem with. Okay. So I'm going to define a circle here and a circle here. Okay. And then I'm going to hit D or click Sketch Dimension, and we're going to make this the same size as this guy. Okay. So to repeat that process, you click dimension, you click the edge of the circle, you click again to put the label for the dimension, and then you click the other dimension label for the thing that you want to copy. Okay, so I'm going to copy this guy. So D3, I guess, is the value for that label. So then hit enter, boom. Now we've got three circles all the same size. Now, if you print this out and have a problem, all you have to do is come back to this sketch. Um, and with the pointer, double click this dimension and say, 12 millimeters wasn't wide enough. There wasn't enough clearance there. So let's make it 13. Okay. And then hit enter and boom, look, the other circle is updated as well. Okay. I'm going to stick with 12 though. So now what we have here is sort of like a rectangle, an outer dimension rectangle, and we have three circles in the middle. Now, just to get your bearings and make sure you understand what's going on here, I'm going to go ahead and click Finish Sketch. I'm going to click the Home button, and we can sort of see what it wants us, what it looks like we're going to get when we extrude it. So if I click the Extrude button and I click the surface and we bring it out, let's do 1 millimeter. Now we can kind of see that we've created a 3D object that's 1 millimeter thick with with three holes for switches on 1 inch centers. Okay, does that make sense? Perfect. So I'm going to go back to the sketch. So what I did was on the left-hand side under the browser, I clicked the sketch drop down, and then I just double clicked this thing that says sketch one. And we could change this name too. If you click the sketch thing twice, we could do like, I don't know, three switch sketch or something. I don't know. I'm terrible at naming things. Actually, I got a better name. Sketchy Mc Sketch Face. There we go. How original. Way to go, Russ. All right. So now what we need to do is add some labels. All right. This is the fun part, in my opinion. Um, so we're going to click the text tool, and if you didn't bring this out, you got to click create, and then actually, I take it back. Actually, I'll go ahead and do this, and I'll show you a trick that I came up with, but it requires reorganizing your thoughts on it, okay? So for some reason, in the Fusion text tool, it draws the dimensions of the text of the box that the text is going to go into is determined by a 2-point rectangle, okay? So if I click once, it's going to give me sort of like a 2-point rectangle here, and then I click again, then that's what it wants to constrain the text to. Now, the problem that I ran into was, let's say, Kim Trails. Let's say I want to center this text, right? Well, it turns out that there's no way to center this box on anything. I could I could move this box and I could like put a specific point to define where the upper left or lower right point of the box goes, but that doesn't help us out at all, does it? I for instrument panel labels, you want like the dead center of the text to be aligned with the dead center of all the other text, right? So here's how I figured out how to do this. Okay. First thing we can do is within the dialog box here for setting the text, we can make the text align center, okay, left and right. And we can make the text align in the middle, up and down. That's what these two alignments do, okay? So that at least means that if we can define a center point of this rectangle, then we define points where the centers need to go, then we know that, like, for example, vertically, the text is going to be aligned center with the switch hole itself. Okay. And then horizontally, we know that the text is going to be aligned with each other. If it's a single line text, they'll be exactly the same. If it's a double line text, the center of mass, or so to speak, will be aligned as well, which I think is proper. You might have different ideas about how to align it. So you're welcome to just do your own thing, I guess. I don't even know why you're watching this video. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and change the font here. I happen to like uh, Futura. Let's see if I can find it. A, B, C, D, E, F. Bold. Well, maybe not bold. Bold. Well, I definitely want it to be capital. The thing with the text box here is Fusion for some reason wants you to enclose the text that you want to use in the single quotes. Okay, if you get rid of the single quotes, it like doesn't work. I don't really know why that's the case, but I'm going to capitalize mine. Boom. So now we're centered vertically, centers horizontally, we're capitalized, which you really do want for instrument panel labels. Lowercase doesn't look right, in my opinion. At least none of the panels I've seen have lowercase. I do like bold for Futura. This is a very like instrument panel-y style font. It's very close, in my opinion, to what Boeing uses on their instrument panels. If you're interested in what they do, look up the Boeing instrument panel process on YouTube. It's pretty fun. It's pretty fascinating. Okay, so but the problem is we're gonna have to rewire our brains here. So if I click OK, I can't really like I don't have a way to define the center point of this. See how it like it'll give me a little dot, but it won't let me uh align that dot properly. See how it's like starts to rotate? I I have no idea what Fusion was thinking with this. But I figured out a way to get this centered. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete this. And we'll start anew. But first, what we're going to do is define the center points for all of our text first. Okay. So let's take it easy and say first thing we want to do is have an off label for each individual switch. So there'll be three off labels centered and below the switch itself. Okay. So I'm going to first come back to construction mode. I'm going to click the little construction toggle switch here and then click the line button. And then I know that we're going to center up vertically on some line that's below the switches. Okay, so I'm going to define a line. Okay, down here, construction line. Now, how far away this line ends up being is just kind of preference. Um, I honestly don't remember what it was that I set mine to. There's kind of some trial and error with it, changing the font size and moving the alignment around until you like what you see. So I'm just going to make up a dimension for now. Um, so what I want to do is, so I hit D. Sorry, I keep using shortcuts here. In the sketch dimension in the upper left-hand corner. So I already have the line selected, and I want to change its dimension from uh, the center point line here. Okay, so I'm going to click that and then drag a dimension out here. Um, I kind of like even numbers, so maybe 20 millimeters. That looks good to me. So now we have three different intersections down here that we can use to center our off labels. Okay. Now here's where the center rectangle really comes in handy. Okay. So I'm going to click center rectangle. And the way this rectangle works is you starting from an origin, you start creating the rectangle, and wherever you drag, it will always the center of the rectangle will always be centered on the origin. And we know that the origin that we just created is exactly center with all the other text that's in that line and the holes itself, right? Beautiful. Okay. And we're in construction mode, which is what we want because we're creating a bounding box where we can select the edges when we do the uh, text tool, right? So check it out. So I'm just going to go ahead and select OK. And then so now we have a box that we can, when we come in here with the text tool, I can select one edge of it. I can select the other edge of it. And now that sample text, as long as you have the alignment set to center and aligned in the middle, will always be centered with that one dot. It's lame that we had to go through all this, but uh, is what it is, I guess. What do I like for size? Okay, 5 millimeters looks good. And then I'm going to do off and then hit OK. Boom. Now that off label is perfectly centered, exactly where we want it, right? Okay, so I'm just going to do this two more times. I'm just going to create a center point rectangle. That's a construction. And then I'm going to just sort of select the next edge because it doesn't really matter. The text can actually overrun these bounding boxes, so it doesn't exactly matter where they go. And then I'm going to hit text. I'm going to do lower right to upper left. And then I'll say this is also off. Okay. And then I'll do it one more time. Lower right to upper left. And we'll say off. Boom. Man, that looks good. Perfect. Okay. I was just using the right mouse button here to sort of pan around. So I'm going to click front to go back front and center. Now, what are some switches that we typically have? Okay. Well, actually, let me set up the top row first. All right. So this is just a repeat of what we keep doing. I'm going to make a line. I'm going to make a horizontal line. Okay. This is construction. All right. So now where does this go? I need to dimension it. So I'm going to hit D, or I'm going to select the sketch dimension. Uh, it's a dark blue color, so we know it's already selected for that line, but we need to dimension it against something else. I'm going to dimension it against our center line here. Click that, come back over here, and I'm just going to make it the same. So I'm going to click on this 20 millimeter dimension. I guess that's D10, right? So these are the same. So if you come back in here in the future and you decide, I need a few more millimeters, between the switch and the label, you can move one and it'll move both. That might not be what you actually want, but we'll go with it in this case. It's easy to change. Okay, so next thing we need to do is make the bounding boxes for the centering of the text. So I'm gonna kind of create some center point rectangles here. Oh, making sure that they are centered on where exactly we want the text to be aligned. All right, and again, the size doesn't matter because the text can be any size. Uh, I don't know why that's the case, but that's what we're going with. Okay, I'm gonna select the text button, and then we're gonna do the exact same thing here. So lower right, upper left. Let's make this master. Okay, and then we'll do text. We'll do lower right, upper left. What's another thing? Lights. All right, I already see a problem, but we'll roll with it for now. Okay, lower right to upper left, and we'll do a two level text here, so I can show you how I handle that as well. So we'll do Kim Trails. Okay, see how everything is nicely aligned, left to right, up to down. Even chemtrails is sort of aligned with the other text. Now, this might not be what you want. Maybe you want trails to be aligned properly with these over here, and you can achieve that just by moving this around, right? Like it doesn't need to be um, exactly on this bounding box, okay? Or you can just not do the bounding box altogether. But one thing I'm noticing here is that we have actually made our font much too large because I happen to know that on 1 inch centers, there's plenty of room to fit all this text, and we're running into a problem here. So what I'm going to do is hover over master. I'm going to double click it, and I'm going to make this 3.5. I knew I remembered that number from somewhere. Okay, and then hit OK, and then I'm going to do that for the rest of these. And again, this is an iterative process, and you might have a smaller or a larger panel than I do, right? So it might not be necessarily that you like all the dimensions that I like. Um, but the key is just play around with it, right? Like that's why this process is so great. You can iterate so quickly, you know? You're not like locked into, oh my God, imagine like designing all this and then spending $1,000 to get it laser etched on an aluminum instrument panel and getting it in and hating the font size or like something wasn't like quite aligned or so. Oh, that stinks. Okay, so for this outer bounding box, actually probably should have done this last just to keep this thing from flashing over and over. We can still change the dimensions because we did not. Oh no! Oh, look how it's like rotating my text. Ugh, why would it do that? I bet somehow this bounding box is attached to. How is it attached? That is wild. Okay, well, that should be an easy fix. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to double click the outer rectangle and hit delete. Okay, so now we don't have that rectangle anymore, and we'll just create a new one. Doo. New rectangle. Actually, we need to delete the construction lines for it as well. Okay, and then I'm just going to create a 2-point rectangle so I don't mess with any of the other dimensions, and then kind of come around here. Oh, and I messed up again. This needs to be a not construction line. Okay, sweet. So let's kind of suck this in a little bit here. I guess it doesn't need to be that big. So I'm just going to kind of grab these edges and bring them in here. That looks good. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish our sketch and see what we're working with here. So see how it updated the sketch dimensions? Now the outside that we had extruded earlier is still, um, everything looks good, right? We've got our 3 holes, we've got an outside surface. Now here is where we need to work on the font, the font, okay? So I'm going to unhide the sketch. Okay, so we already have one extrusion, and that's the base. So I'm gonna extend bodies here. Body one is gonna be the base plate at 1 millimeter, right? So I'm just gonna name this base plate to make things easier on us in the future. Okay, so what is gonna eventually happen here is the text itself gets extruded as its own body. Okay. Then when we export it as a 3MF file, uh, each text body becomes an object in Bambu Studio. And Bambu Studio can color objects individually. So uh, we will use Bambu Studio to paint the text body in whatever color we want. So for example, like base plate will end up being black, and then each individual text body will be white, for example. Okay. Um, to get there from here, what we're going to need to do is uh, use the text surface itself to cut a text shape hole in the base plate. Then step two is going to be to extrude the text surface itself into its own individual bodies. Okay. Th- this one took me a while to figure out. You cannot just extrude the text as its own object inside of the base plate that doesn't have the hole in it, because Bambu Studio uses the hole to align the object. So apparently it just gets like a jumbled collection of objects in the 3MF file, and then it like auto determines where those objects should go. So there needs to be a hole first before you can create the text object itself. So let's get started. The first thing that we need to do is create a new extrusion, okay? And then we are going to come in here and select, let's hide the base plate for now, okay? And to do that, you come over here to base plate and click the eyeball sign. Um, so we want to come in here and highlight the text so that it becomes dark blue, okay? So off, off, off. So we can see in the extrude menu here, we've got 6 things selected. We are starting from, I guess, origin. Click front here again. And instead of a new body, we want to do a cut. And in order to cut, we have to re-show the base plate, or else it'll complain at us. Okay. And then objects to cut probably already knows, but yeah, base plate. There you go. Okay. So see how it's red? Let me see if I can zoom in here. See how it's red and sort of goes through the body itself? That's exactly what we want. Okay. So hit OK. And then I'm going to click home. So we're in the home view. Let's click front and sort of zoom in. I'm going to use the mouse wheel to zoom in. Okay. Let's hide sketchy mixed sketch face and then sort of inspect our what we have here. So now we can see we have the base plate with the original holes, and we have cut text shape holes into the base plate. Okay, perfect. So let's reset our view. I'll go back home, click front. Now what we need to do is re-extract the text into its own object, right? So I'm going to unhide the sketch, okay? Because we need to be able to select it to do the extrude. I'm going to click extrude, and then I am going to hide the base plate and select each individual text. Wait a minute. I think something might have gone wrong here. Let me hit cancel. Let's hide the sketch. Did the inside of the oh, that worked. That worked okay. Nope. Fake news, fear monger. Let me reset my view. Okay. Unhide the sketch. Well, I'm going to click extrude. Hide the see what's happening here is it's trying to select the body instead of the sketch surface. So by hiding the base plate, it just allows you to select the right thing. Just one of those quirks that you got to figure out. So I'm going to select off. Oops. Oh, okay. Hit escape, and then that sort of messed with me. Okay, so I'm gonna hit extrude again. Somehow escape. Somehow baseplate came back. Okay, okay. Let's reset. If you get into trouble, if you have a problem, try your best not to get frustrated because it can be very frustrating software. Um, just know that you can keep playing around with things. Sometimes you have to hide layers and bodies, and you'll get there eventually. Okay. Sometimes a lot of these things, even what seems like a very simple operation, like what we're doing, which is extruding text, or even aligning text in the right spot, can be like overly complicated. Um, but just take it like bite-sized chunks at a time. If you built an airplane, you already know how to do this, right? Okay. So I'm going to go back to extrude. I'm going to make sure base plate is hidden. I'm going to click each individual text surface. Okay, so for this extrude, we're not going to cut. We're going to create a new body. Okay. Uh, and we want 1 millimeter, right? Because that was the width of our original base plate. Oh, it just looks weird because the body's not there. Okay, so we can see that just like with the base plate, now we have like a three-dimensional thing from the text, right? Okay. Now, what it's going to do is it's going to automatically switch this operation to a join because you're extruding into another object. We do not want to do that. We want to change this to new body. Okay. So each one of these text pieces will get its own body. And that's important because when we export it, we want those to be listed separately in Bambu Studio so that we can color it properly. Okay. So we're going to hit OK. And I'm going to reset the view and re-show the base plate. Okay, so now we basically have a big giant base plate. That's one thing, and then we have these individual bodies, which happens to be the text itself. Okay, now this is pretty simple. I think we could church it up a little bit and at least add some fillets. So I would like to add some fillets to this sketch just to sort of like give it some nice rounded edges. Um, I'm always kind of curious whether or not this is better to do in the sketch itself or out here in the 3D space. Let's do the sketch itself. So I'm going to close bodies. I'm going to reopen Sketchy Mix Sketch Face, and then I'm going to add some fillets here. So to add a fillet, which is just sort of like a rounded over hard edge, um, it wants you to select two surfaces. Okay, so you can see if I select these two surfaces. Uh, it just sort of like rounds over this edge and then I can select the radius that it goes. So we just kind of want to see what looks good. Maybe 5 millimeters. Okay, but that's not the only surface that I want to do. I also want to do this surface, and this one. So they'll all be the same. Well, maybe a little bit more. Gonna drag it. We'll do 6. Hit enter. Perfect. So we'll do finish sketch. And we can see, even though we've done a few operations, uh, it will carry your change in a sketch forward on those operations. Now, I don't know how to replicate this, but occasionally when you edit an old sketch, uh, it will not do all of the operations. Usually happens when you like modify text and then it doesn't know how to select that text for extrusion. It will give you a hint though in the timeline down here on the lower left hand side. One of these will be pink. It'll change from blue to pink. So then what you do is you'll just double click that and it will bring back up the extrude text box and it will select all of the things that it thinks needs to be extruded. And usually what happens is you'll just need to select the new text that you changed or something like that, right? So you can go back and heal the process if you changed something in the past. So I think this actually looks pretty good. Let's do one more thing. Let's go back to Sketchy Mix Sketch Face. I kind of like to have outlines around instrument panels. Um, and so I would like to show you how to use the offset tool. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to draw a 1 millimeter outline around this and expect to color that white. So it'll be a black base, it'll be a white outline, we'll have white text, and we've got 1 inch centers, okay? I think that's a pretty good way to do it. So in order to select this rectangle now, I just need to double click one edge. That will select all of the edges connected to that one edge, okay? And then I'll click the offset tool. Now I want to go 1 millimeter, but you know what? I actually think inside would probably be okay. Let's go outside. So it wants to go in one direction. I want it to go the other, so I'm going to reverse the direction. Okay. So 1 millimeter. All right. You can even do like two sides and whatever, but that's what we'll do for now. So I'm going to hit finish sketch. Okay. So we see the original body here. And then now we have sort of like a new sketch line on this outside edge. So all we need to do is extrude that as its own body because it needs to be a separate object for us to color it in Bambu Studio. Okay, so I'm going to hit extrude. I'm going to select the new edge. I'm going to do 1 millimeter. Okay, and again, it's going to want to join because it rides up against another body, but we want to change that to new body. Okay. Uh, we do want to give ourselves some hints here. So for the, I believe it, is this it? No. Well, let's find, if you hover over a body, sometimes it will, is my face in the way? It will highlight it for you. Okay, body 40. We know body 40 is the outline. So I'm just going to change the name of that real quick. Everything else is text and baseplate, which it's you could name it if you want to, but I don't really think it's that necessary. It becomes pretty obvious what you need to color once you're done with the baseplate and the outline. Okay, cool. So that's it. We've got ourselves a nice little instrument panel here, 1 inch centers, BNC size holes. We've got 3.5 millimeter high Futura Bold font. We've got a 1 millimeter outline that we're going to change colors. I think this looks pretty good. I think we're ready for the export. Okay, so here are the things you need to know for exporting this file into Bambu Studio. We are going to go to the Utilities menu up here. Okay, we're going to click the 3D print button. Kind of looks like a 3D printer. We want to select all of the objects that we just created. So currently only baseplate is selected, and we don't want that. We want all the bodies. So the way I found to do it is to up here on the drop down menu in the browser where it says bodies, just select bodies with it closed. I think that's right. Is that right? One selected. Let's unselect everything and select bodies. There we go. Perfect. One selected and it's bodies. It's not very obvious, but if you end up selecting only one thing, it won't export everything. So the format that we're going to be doing is 3MF. I don't know if this was invented by Bamboo, but they definitely use it as their import. Now, traditionally, when you export something to a what we're Bamboo Studio is something called a slicer, and I'll get into that in a second. But when you normally export to a slicer like Cura, um, it will want an STL. That was the classic file, but an STL does not include all of the information that we need in order to color the objects, at least from what I'm aware. So you want this 3MF format, okay? Structure is one file. That's correct. Don't need to preview. Hit OK. And it'll want you to save it. So we'll do YouTube panel demo. There was recently a Fusion update. I don't know what that means. So right here is where it saves it. So we'll do user address desktop 3D printer, 3D prints. That works. Okay, and we're done with that. Let's open up Bamboo Studio. Well, let's see if we can get it to open up in the right window. Okay, here we go. You can see some of my old work here. Um, we want to open project, YouTube panel demo, hit open. Okay, here are the options that you want to do. We designed our thing in millimeters, right? And it's confused. This is a really confusing dialog box. So it thinks it's in inches and wants you to scale it to millimeters, but if you do that, then the conversion like blows everything up and it doesn't work. So for this dialog box that says, do you want to scale to millimeters? Click no. Okay. And it didn't do it, but sometimes there is a second dialog box that will say, do you want to import as objects? And to the second dialog box, you want to click yes if you get that box. Otherwise, it will just spread all of your objects all over the build plate, and it'll be super obvious that you screwed up. So go back and select yes to the second dialog box option, okay? Now, so let's do a quick UI. Let me make this bigger. Let's do a quick UI run through for Bamboo Studio real quick. Let me find a place to put my head. Ooh. All right. Now to orbit, what you want to do is uh, click with the left mouse button, okay, and then you rotate it around. To zoom in and out, you use the scroll wheel, okay, and then to pan left and right, you can use the right mouse button, okay. Now, when we first load up our project, what we're looking at is the a physical representation of the build plate in the 3D printer, okay. Uh, When we first load it up, see how in the lower right-hand side it says number of currently selected objects? It auto selects all of the objects that we just imported, okay? If you hit escape, now nothing is selected. Now what we're looking at here is, in my case, it just sort of picked one color and painted everything that color. That's not really what we want to do, right? So find an area that's empty and select the base plate, okay? And I happen to have my filament colors already loaded up. So I have, for example, like ABS black. Here's what I want to make the base plate. And it's assigned to number 3. Let me rewind it for a second. In this middle box here, you are looking at the filaments that are loaded into your multi-filament system. Okay. So I have like a lime green PLA. I have a white PLA. I have a black ABS, and I have a white ABS. In this case, for this demo, I'm going to use white and black ABS. Okay, and they're assigned numbers. So I have black ABS on number 3, and I have white ABS on number 4. Now, since I have just the base plate selected, if I press number 3, yeah, I have multiple different filaments loaded, so it's going to give me some warnings. So now the base plate is black and everything else is white. Now, generally, what I find the easiest way to go about doing this is to hit Alt A or Control A, whatever selects all on your computer. See, so we've selected everything. If you don't know how to use shortcuts to select all, I'll show you. Up here, if you hold Shift and left mouse click, you have this little rectangle box that you can select. Just just hover that over everything to select all again. Okay, so that Shift left click, uh, just enclose everything, right? And that'll select all objects. So I think I found what makes this easier instead of individually setting all of the text objects to white, it's easier to make everything white first. Okay, so I'm going to select four. So now we've just made everything white and then hit escape to unselect everything. Then select just the base plate with your mouse pointer, and then select three, whatever your darker color is. Okay, so that gets us most of the way there. Um, One issue that we're going to have is there are floating layers inside the text. See how the inside of the O is white? These will need to be black. Okay. So what we're going to need to do is come in here, zoom in, figure out which number your black is. In my case, it's three. Then just select that piece and hit three. Okay. So I'm just going to go through here and select everything that's a floating object and hit three. There might be a better way of doing this, but I spent a lot of time trying to figure it out and I never came up with anything. Plus, this only takes a couple seconds. Perfect. Look how good this looks, man. I'm so happy with this. Okay, so we have the white outline. This is going to be, in this case, white ABS. We've got a black base plate and white colors. Awesome. Now, there's one more thing that we need to do here, and that is flip the whole thing around. Okay. So one of the things that you'll need to do is to print on a smooth build plate. Okay, so for example, what comes with the Bambu printer, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to show you this realistically or not, but this is the default build plate for the Bambu printer. And I don't know if you'll be able to see it on camera, but it has a rough, oh, there we go, against the light. Oh, well, now it's not working. It has a rough surface, okay? Now, if we print our instrument panel label face down, the face will come out with the rough surface. Now, that's actually okay. It looks decent, uh, but it does happen to sort of like catch the light a little bit. So if you have no other options, printing it on the rough surface, this is what they call the textured PEI plate. If you have no other options or your filament is giving you trouble, then just go ahead and print it on this build plate. You're good. In fact, you could probably wet sand it for a couple minutes afterwards. I haven't tried that yet, but I bet that would work just to sort of smooth it out. If you want to skip a step, you need something called the smooth PEI plate, which looks like this. It's the same plate, but let me see if I can catch the light. But it's 100% smooth on it. So the idea is that if you print face down on a smooth surface, you will come out with a smooth front of your instrument panel label. Okay. But to get there, the first thing that we're going to have to do is flip this around because currently it's printing face up. Now you might ask, well, why don't I just print it face up? You can do that. However, I have found that the top surface of a print is always less smooth than either the other scenarios. Okay. So you might even be able to wet sand it again if you want to do it, but we could save ourselves some effort if we just print it face down. Now to do that, We need to rotate 40 objects in this case to be face down. Okay. So let's do the same thing that we did earlier where we selected everything. All right. That's shift click and then drag the rectangle. All right. And then in the upper sort of like center left, we're going to click rotate. Okay. So in the Y dimension, under rotate, I actually don't know the difference between relative and absolute. They seem to do the same thing. In the Y dimension, I'm just going to say, give me 180 degrees and then hit enter. Okay. And then hit escape. So now we can see it prints face down. Perfect. If I grab it with, it's sometimes hard to flip it around, but if I grab it with my left mouse button and flip around, we're looking at it from underneath the build plate here. It still looks proper, right? Because we're printing it face down. Okay. So I'm going to scroll back around here to the top. Perfect. Man, this is going to come out so good. I'm really excited about this. Okay. So from here, there are some 3D printer settings that you need to know about. First, to print 3.5 millimeter high text, you really need to have a nozzle that is zero point 0.2 millimeters. Okay. By default, the Bambu nozzles are zero point 0.4 millimeters. You can do panels in 0.4 millimeter nozzles, but you need to have much larger text. Okay. And then I found for like what you would expect the size of text to be on an instrument panel, you really do need to have a 0.2 millimeter nozzle. So throw that in your shopping cart if you're going to buy a 3D printer. Every 3D printer I know has a 0.2 millimeter nozzle. Okay. In this case, I am using the predefined, sorry, let me reset for a second. Underneath filaments is like the print settings. Okay. Um, you can select presets for print settings. Um, the big thing with these presets, though, is how high the layers are uh, that the 3D printer is putting down. Now, you might think, at least I thought, that the smaller the layers, the more intricate I could print, the more detailed I could print. But that turned out not to be the case. All you seem to do is by using more layers, you kind of just introduce more problems that can go wrong with the print. So what I found is select the largest layer size that you can get away with, because once that first layer is put down nicely, if that layer is thick enough, mistakes on subsequent layers don't bleed through the white text. Okay. So in this example, with a zero point 0.2 millimeter nozzle, I selected 0.12 millimeter layer lines. Okay. The default profile. The other thing that you will need to change is let me move my face out of the way. We want the uh, layers to print all the way through to be 100% infill. Okay. So we're going to come to strength. We're going to select 100%. And then it's going to give us a little warning about like what grid pattern to put in, which I don't know why, because it's 100% infill because there's no grid pattern. So you just select yes to that. Now, the neat thing about Bambu Studio is from the default profile, if you ever change anything and you forgot what you changed, it'll be colored orange. So the tab is orange, and then the thing in here that you changed is also orange. Perfect. So that's actually all we need to do for configuration settings for a Bambu printer. Now, your printer is going to be different. You might not even have the same slicer, but good luck. I'm sure you can come up with a similar configuration from your printer to that printer slicer. Okay. Uh, Another thing that I didn't touch on because we use the mouse pointer for everything is if you select this objects tab, you can individually change the color of these objects. So for example, body 10 is like one of the O's. You could click this and then change the color, right? That's another way of accessing the bodies, objects. Their bodies in Fusion, their objects in Bambu Studio. Okay. So this is just another way of like you see the outlines here, the base plates here, easy. Okay. But we don't need to do that because we just use the mouse pointer to click the object itself. All right. So let's go ahead and click slice plate. So what this does is the computer software comes up with a tool path for the 3D printer to lay down all these colors. Okay. The important thing to do within the preview pane, so we were over here in prepare, now we're in preview, is to make sure that white is printed first. This is paramount to get a good quality first layer print of your instrument panel label, okay? If white prints first and it has a little bit of an issue, it's way less obvious than if black prints first and it doesn't make a proper outline, okay? On the plate itself, we're going to zoom out. Oh, we must need to be in prepare. Okay. So on the tab on the upper left-hand side, there are settings on the plate, and on the lowest button, I guess, there's like a gear, a nut. We're going to click the nut. Okay. We want to make sure that all layers print white first. Maybe it only matters for first, but specifically we want to make sure that white always goes first. Okay. So we're going to click from auto to customize. And then from in here, you can drag your filaments around in different orders. Okay, so two could go first. In my case, one's going first, but I'm not using lime green. Okay, and then we'll just do the same thing down here, right? So you can drag these around. You're embarrassing me in front of my friends. Okay, maybe you gotta, oh, okay, you gotta just like hover over the, okay, I got you. Just drag these around to make sure that for your case, white goes first. Okay, I'm gonna hit cancel. All right, so preview. And then from here, that's it. All you got to do is hit print plate and click go, and your printer will print you out a brand new label. I am going to go ahead and kick this off, and I'll get back to you, and we'll see what our results are. Okay, so about an hour later, our 3D print finished. Let's see what we've got here. Oh man, that looks good. Nice and smooth. Not too much reflection. Everything looks nice. I don't see any issues. God dang, that looks good. It's, I mean, you literally cannot feel, it's like it was just printed into existence. Man, I love it. Okay, so here we are about an hour later, and our print is finished. And my God, this thing looks so good. Nice and smooth, no texture, no bumps. Even the backside looks good, man. I think you could totally get away with printing this upside down. It's just not quite as perfect, you know? So where do we go from here? Okay, in my case, the switch nut itself holds the label on, okay? So this goes through my instrument panel itself. I'm not changing that. But then this goes over to sandwich on the instrument panel, and then the nut goes over this. Okay, then the nut holds the instrument panel label. If you happen to build a long easy or cozy where we have like kind of the thicker instrument panels, there is room for a BNC switch, the normal instant instrument panel thickness, which is something like 3/8, plus this, plus the nut. You do have enough room to do it all. If you print something that's more like a placard that doesn't have a switch through it, like the passenger warning, I like to attach that type of stuff with clear RTV. Just get a tube of clear RTV or silicone from Ace or Home Depot and smear just a very thin layer on the back and then just slap it on there. It's sticky enough to hold itself in place, and then once it cures, it'll stay. And then the upside is you can put some floss through the back of it if you want to cut it off and put something else on it. You can kind of scrape away the residue from silicone with Goo Gone. It's an annoying process, but better than like cutting holes in the instrument panel, in my opinion. What type of filament do you need to print this in? I would have told you you need to print this in ABS or something that is more heat resistant because a lot of us in the 3D printer world have had PLA parts sort of like warp in hot cockpits. However, I printed some PLA test pieces, and dang it if they haven't held up in my hot cockpit for about a month now. Uh, I think because they're unloaded in any direction and the nuts are holding them on, they're just unlikely to like fully melt. So if you have problems printing your panels in ABS or some really fancy engineering filament, but you can print them in PLA, then go for it. I mean, I think that's totally reasonable option. And if for some reason the edges do sort of warp, you can always glue them down with silicone or put some screws in the edges or something like that, right? So that about wraps up this incredibly long video. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you watching. If you do this process, I would absolutely love to hear your feedback. Please find me on Facebook. Uh, I post mostly under the Cozy Mark IV Builders community, or you can leave a comment here. It would just make me so happy for literally anybody to make it all the way through this long video and put some of this knowledge to use. All right, guys, see you next time.